Welcome, Sharon. It's so good to talk to you. I wanted to start by talking about something that you said in your wonderful video, Street Lovingkindness, which I was just watching. It starts, and you say, rush hour, no need to rush, slow down, stop, see. That really touched me because so many of us move through our lives feeling like time is running out. Could you talk a little bit about the connection between our approach to time and the sort of lack of well-being that a lot of folks feel?
Well, yeah, I mean, we are jamming, all of us, I think. And, people say, and I think it's true, the fact that we have mobile devices now so that we are just on, we have the potential to be on, every waking moment of our lives means that there's a lot of input, there's a lot of stimulation, and it needs a very conscious decision just to step back and say, I need a moment or I need a break. And when we do, of course, then it's really phenomenal because we can see, we can open, we can get connected to so much that's just going by as we're running by, and we have a very different feeling of contact and connection.
Is it that people are afraid of missing something? Is that why we feel this need to be plugged in all the time?
Well, that's what they say. There's this woman, Linda Stone, who became a friend of mine. She's known as a thought leader. I'm not quite sure what a thought leader is, but she coined a phrase which was in my book, Real Happiness, which was continuous partial attention. She really laid at the feet of just what you're saying, that we're afraid of missing something. So maybe we're on email and we think, what about Twitter? And then, we go on Twitter and we think, what about Facebook? And then email and then, back again. And it's just kind of crazy.
And what do you recommend? Do you recommend that people turn their devices off for part of the day? What's a good practice for that?
Yeah, I think anything that would be along the nature of getting a break. One of my great Tibetan teachers high up in the Himalayas talked about short moments many times. It's actually a very, very powerful practice. It can feel like, nothing's going to happen out of a moment, I've got so much to do, and there's so much pressure, and there's so much momentum around me. But actually short moments many times of, stepping back, coming back to ourselves, breathing, getting connected, remembering what we care about more than anything. These are very powerful moments, and they do make a difference.
Mm-hmm. And it doesn't mean we have to turn off half the day. It just means we have to take 5 minutes, an hour or something.
That's right. Even, 2 minutes every hour or something. Or usually what people do is they ritualize it in some way so that there's a signal. This is where the, now kind of famous, don't pick up the phone on the first ring. Let it ring 3 times and breathe. That's where this comes from. Or, when you write the email, just write it and don't press send right away. Take a few breaths, read it again, then decide, do you actually want to, send it or not? There's so many options for our moment, and it's not hard to do. It's very hard to remember, work environment or, a lot of pressure, whatever it might be, and to remember and to know that it's valuable to remember. That's what's hard.
Mm-hmm. Well, something that was said on the Katie Couric show that you just did, that I was just watching, around multitasking being a fallacy. The fact is, that we can't actually multitask.
Yeah, I think science shows that actually we think we're multitasking, but what's happening is that our attention is flipping very quickly back and forth between different activities or different kinds of stimulation, and so our subjective experience is that we're multitasking. In fact, we're not, and research also shows that we're less effective, we're getting less done, and we're not doing things as well. The myth, of course, is that we're going to get a whole lot more done and we're going to do everything in a really excellent fashion, and neither of those things are true.
Right. And of course, the being plugged in all the time just feeds that sense of wanting to have, 5 balls in the air at every moment.
Oh, yeah, and it's just the sign of the times. It feels like that's a natural way of being, inevitable way of being, and yet it's not really that way.
Are you able in your personal life to just turn off the social media piece and and get quiet in the midst of your very busy life?
Well, It's very funny because there's a retreat group in New York that was doing a kind of voluntary renunciation month, and they asked me to join in and to give up some amount of social media, and I said something like, ask me, later or something, and they said, why? And I told them the Gandhi story about how a mother and child came to see him, and the mother said to Gandhi, please tell my son to stop eating sweets, stop eating sugar, and Gandhi said, come back in a week, and they did. And the mom said, why did you want the week? And Gandhi said, well, because I had to stop myself. No, I couldn't really give him advice that I wasn't following. So it's a little bit like that. No, I am increasingly conscious just of the time and the amount of time and all of that. So,
how does meditation change our relationship to time, Sharon?
Well, I think it's all about contact and connection. That there's a certain way in which time goes very, very quickly because we're missing so much. We feel kind of hollow or empty in that disconnection, and we don't have that sense of fulfillment of an experience fully lived very often. And so in some ways being more mindful and more conscious really slows down time, and we get much more of that sense of fulfillment. And in other ways, you realize how much we're bound by time, and it's like the tyranny of time, and that it doesn't have to be that way. Like holding on to something and experiencing it longer isn't necessarily going to make it a better experience. Plus, activity, since we can't usually make something stay.
So in other words, if we're present, then time falls away and our experience deepens.
Yes, that's right.
You write a column for NPR, which is really wonderful, on being. And one of your columns was called Everything We Do Matters. Can you say what you meant by that?
I think, everything does matter, and at the same time we live in a sort of nihilistic era where it feels like our actions are inconsequential, especially if you're trying to make a difference, try to make it a better world or help somebody or, have there be less suffering. You can feel like there's nothing coming from this, The problems are intractable, the institutions are immovable, but I think when we really pay attention, we see that we are in the realm of the unknown a lot. We can't always know exactly how our actions will ripple out and the effects they might have, but it all matters, that it's important that we do the good that's in front of us and not just say, well, I couldn't possibly make a difference.
And what about looking at it another way, which is that people tend to think that things matter more than they do. The small things, the worries, the fears. Don't we invest more importance into trivial things than they're worth sometimes? Oh,
totally. And that's why in the Buddhist teaching they talk about the Buddha in the middle way, right? And it's not only the middle way. Commonly it's known as the middle way between a life of overindulgence as one extreme and a life of kind of brutalizing yourself as the other extreme. Buddha cut right through both of those and said, neither of these is the way to liberation. What you need is the middle way. But it's also actually the middle way between those two extremes we just talked about. One is that, nothing matters, and it's all just sort of a nihilistic blur. And the other thing is that everything matters, the other extreme, and I've got to hold on to this, and this is so grating, and this is forever, and all of that kind of, which is an extreme view, that kind of attachment and clinging.
I just had a flash when you were saying that. I wonder if we're paying attention in the moment but not obsessing, maybe that's one way to give things their proper due, without exaggerating their importance. If we're actually paying attention in the moment.
Yeah, no, totally, and that's why sometimes people hear things like the middle way or the middle path, and it sounds sort of mediocre, like it's just sort of bland and a little bit of each extreme, but it's a whole other approach, and it's based very much on what you were just saying, seeing what is the truth of the present moment.
What about loving kindness and balance? Is there a relationship between an open heart and equilibrium?
Yes, because hearts break, as we know, and when we care with attachment, we have all the ups and downs of, it's like giving a gift with strings attached, or giving a gift needing, to be thanked in a certain way, and we just can't control that. Whereas if we have equilibrium, if we have some balance of mind, which means perspective, it doesn't mean coldness or indifference, it really means space, some spaciousness and some perspective, then we can give a gift, and the joy is in the giving. It's in the integrity of the act. And certainly we'd like to be thanked. We'd like someone to, say, that's like the best book I've ever gotten, thank you. But we can't control that, and we recognize we can't control that. So we have a measure of balance and peace no matter what. And that really, people think equilibrium or equanimity will take away from an open heart, and it actually is the biggest foundation for an open heart, because we can keep going through adversity. It doesn't become about ourselves, our own ego, our own satisfaction. It's really a tremendous strength.
Mm. Well, I know you're writing a book right now about love, and are you saying that without equilibrium and self-awareness, love can't really be effective?
I don't know that love can't be effective. I think love is very hard to sustain. Mm-hmm. Even though the word balance is not that exciting a word, and it's not what we usually associate with love, but I think there's a kind of balance within love and a movement toward balance that really helps love be whatever it is, love for a friend, love for oneself, love for a lover, child, have it come into greater flowering. Because of all things, we certainly have a lot of assumptions and fears and, lots of stuff around the issue of love. And so for example, I was in the book telling a story about a friend of mine who had gone through a serious illness, and coming out the other side, she was taking a look at everything in her life. And one of the things she realized was that in her marriage, she, as she put it, she said, I was the kind of person who I'd be sitting in the car with my husband, boiling hot, and the most I could bring myself to say to him was, are you warm, dear? And she realized that on her trajectory of healing, and always, on all levels, that had to change. That was way out of balance. And so for her, coming into a greater balance, which meant integrity and the true generosity, it looked a certain way. It wouldn't necessarily look that way for everybody, or for her at a different time, even. Right.
Well, so what that says to me is that in her illness, she realized that self-care and self-love were also a big part of the picture, and she couldn't have a healthy relationship unless she took care of herself as well.
That's right, and had a voice, could actually know what she wanted and express it.
Talk to me a little bit about intention and flexibility. How can we be firm without being hard? How can you have a strong intention and also be flexible?
I think we have, one manifestation of intention is aspiration, and we can have a really big aspiration. Usually, if anything, I think our aspirations, our dream, our vision is kind of muted. It's pretty small, but we can aspire to be, I don't mean aspire in a specific sense, like I'm going to, climb a mountain by this date, but aspire toward deep happiness, toward love, something like that. And it can be really big. And yet, the day-to-day, moment-to-moment experience we have is really a process, seeing what is, being able to adjust. Sometimes people use their aspirations or their intentions of whatever kind, whatever level, as a kind of prison for themselves. Well, failed today,
Yeah.
Like, not good enough, and it's really not meant to be that way at all. It's much more a sense of joy and discovery and the flexibility to keep moving, keep shifting, keep changing, which means keeping aware, because there's no other way to do that.
And there is a difference between goals and aspirations as well, and goals and intentions. So if you're fixed on a goal, I think it's maybe harder to be flexible than if you're fixed in the intention to be happy, to be wise, to move toward the greater good. That's very different than I'm going to get that on that X date, which is how a lot of folks get into fixated hope, and that can lead to a lot of rigidity and suffering, can't it?
Oh, well, it always does.
That was a rhetorical, can't it?
Yeah, I think that's the nature of it, and that's how you can tell, that you're holding on too tightly or you have too many expectations, and because you suffer.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious about mindfulness versus self-consciousness. How can we be mindful without being overly self-conscious? What's the middle way in that practice?
Well, one of the characteristics that isn't always so talked about, it's not always so prevalent in discussions about mindfulness, is really the non-judgmental aspect of it. That we're not just aware like we're reaching for a teacup, for example, but we're paying attention in a way that our ordinary habits of mind don't have so much sway. So, maybe there's a certain uncomfortable sensation in your body, for example, and your tendency right away is to start projecting it into the future, like what's it going to feel like in a week? What's it going to feel like a month? And so then not only do you have the present moment's worth of discomfort, there's also all of that anticipated discomfort, and we suffer so much more from that. Mm-hmm. So it's really seeing that, there's another way of relating, not just being with and not just knowing that this is happening in the moment and that's happening in the moment, but it can be an entirely different way of relating to our experience. And I think self-consciousness, part of it is a little bit of judgment. Everyone's looking at me,
Right. And that's different. And that's different than mindfulness.
Yeah, it is.
My last question is, does the word spirituality ever interfere with mindfulness and simple presence, do you think?
The word spirituality, because people don't like the word?
Well, either that or they aggrandize the word. They think they're being spiritual and they're actually forgetting to be kind, that kind of thing.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just wondering, how else does the word spirituality interfere with presence and mindfulness, do you think?
Well, I think my first assumption, was that, for a lot of people, we do live in a kind of cynical age, and the idea of spirituality is a real turnoff. And, they would then associate mindfulness with something kind of woo-woo and ungrounded, which it really isn't. More in the way that you're talking about it. It's hard to remember in any meditative process that the goal really isn't to have certain kinds of experiences, to feel all floaty and warm, to have altered states of consciousness, because that fits in both with our normal acquisitive tendency, like, hey, I have a great experience, I can stop meditating all month, I've already had the experience. And it also suits our desires. It's, it's more exciting to say to a friend who asked you how your meditation was, well, first it was peaceful, then it was blissful, then it was ecstatic, rather than say, well, first my knee hurt and then my back hurt.
Right.
And then I was bored and then I was restless. But from the point of view of mindfulness, they're both equally valid experiences, because the point is to use any experience as a vehicle for greater understanding because of the different relationship we have with it. And so, of course, but no one would like to have to tell that to a friend,
Right.
So it's hard to understand, it's hard to believe, and it's hard to remember that the whole process is not about having any particular kind of experience. And so I love what you said, that in a way it's all about being kind. It's about having different strengths in our life, our regular old day-to-day life, which definitely happens.
Mm-hmm. And I love the way you talk about enlightenment, not as this grand, top of the mountain thing, but as every time we realize, for instance, during meditation that our mind has wandered, that's a moment of enlightenment.
They say every moment of mindfulness is a moment of enlightenment because we're not adding grasping, aversion, or delusion to our experience in the present moment. So the mind free of grasping, aversion, and delusion is a pretty good definition of enlightenment.
It's great. Well, thank you, Sharon. It's so good to talk to you, and good luck with the new book, and I know everybody can't wait to see your book on love.
Thank you.